Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am Courtney Anderson, your host and guide for this show. Today's show is an episode in our Myth Warriors series. Now, our Myth Warriors series is all about getting out there and kind of throwing against the wall ideas, concepts, things that are percolating in our world, in our minds, and examining or beginning to examine, is this something that's accurate? Is it something that I really should believe? Is it credible? Or is this something that's kind of a myth? Is it something that might be actually an obstacle to me surpassing my goals? So when we're in our Myth Warrior series and we're beginning to examine, is this something that I might want to adhere to as a something that I integrate into my life? Is something that might be accurate? Or is this something that absolutely not? It's just a bunch of malarkey, as they say. It's just not, accurate at all. And the fact that I believed this has actually harmed me potentially. Okay. So what's the target? What's our target for this show? We are myth warriors fighting against myths. Our target for today's episode is in a fight against yourself, you will always lose. So stop. In a fight against yourself, you will always lose. So stop. So that's the title. And this program is come about for a couple of reasons. There have been so many times, and even recently, where I've been reading something in the media or looking at something, and you'll see a narrative, you'll see a story about a real life person who seemingly should have, quote, had it all, right? And so there's a whole debate about what that means. What does having it all mean? There's a debate within certainly different cultures and groups. There's debates within different genders. What does it mean to have it all? But certainly I think there would be some general consensus among people. Having it all would be, power, right? Maybe power and wealth. They usually go together. Influence. Some people would put fame or notoriety in there, right? So you have the ability to get things done. That's what power is. You have the ability with wealth and resources to have almost no limit or very few limits to what that is or how grand a scale that you can do things on. And if you are famous, for some people that's really important, right? The idea that not just that you have these the power and the wealth, but that people know you, right? That they know you have this. So maybe when you go to a restaurant or you walk in a room, people, oh, that's them. Look at them. And some people would add or argue, well, I'd want to be, someone that people thought was, attractive. So I'd want to be either, beautiful or handsome or whatever that version is. Okay. So there are instances, and I know that every single one of you has had this in your life, right? Where you're reading something or you hear something and you think, wait a minute. And you hear about a person and something horrible happened. And it wasn't an accident, typically, not totally. But it was some sort of thing happened, and maybe it was a culmination of them seemingly not liking themselves. So sometimes it might be that we hear something and there's somebody who's rich or famous or both or powerful or all of that, or someone who's talented. Oftentimes there are people who are special talents among all of the billions of people on this planet, right? There are a few people literally know their individual names because often of a talent. It could be an athletic talent. It might be an artistic talent. Maybe they're a musician or they're a filmmaker. Perhaps they're a playwright. I mean, they could be all kinds of different things. But there are people that are so talented, they're so specially different than the rest of us, that their ability to, play the cello or ride a bicycle or sing a song puts them in a place where people know their names and people sort of give them praise and acclaim. Often they're so good at what they do that they're often at some point literally the best in the world. I can't even imagine what that's like, right? You're at that moment, you're the best in the world at whatever it is, bobsledding or disco dancing, or it's just amazing, or playing chess, or just anything, just to be the best. And that's exciting. Just as someone who's never been in that position, and in all likelihood, anything's possible, but probably won't be. At least, let's say, probably athletically. It probably won't happen that I'll be an Olympic gold medalist. What's the point? The point simply is that we'll see something and we'll think, my goodness, how could that person, right? We know their name. Often they're very, quote, successful, meaning that they literally have been the best in the world or one of the best in the world at what they do. They seemingly have quite a bit of wealth and or power. Some of them have been, lauded for their attractiveness in addition to their talents. And you see these, and then something happens where seemingly they turn against themselves. And what are we saying? Some of the most obvious ones of these are when someone who seemingly, quote, has it all, hurts themselves. So sometimes people who seemingly have it all will read something and, oh my goodness, they've hurt themselves. So they physically, usually, when we'll read about it in an account, they physically tried to hurt themselves. And sometimes they physically try to hurt themselves and they succeed. So sometimes people, they murder themselves, right? They commit suicide. And you'll think often, well, what on earth? Why would someone who literally their name is known? And that's a really rare thing, right? How many of us, our name is known? That's just out of the multitude of people on this planet or in human history. And their name's not known for some horrible thing, right? That they were, some, mass murderer or some horrible person. Their name's known for a good thing, that they were, really great at something or the best at something. And you'll see that and we'll think, my goodness, how could that happen? That's very rare, but it happens. And then it all happens sometimes where someone will say, well, maybe they didn't mean to hurt themselves. Maybe they were abusing, drugs and alcohol. And then that maybe accidentally, when they were abusing drugs and or alcohol, then they died, but they didn't really want to die. Maybe they just were abusing the drugs and alcohol, and then as a sort of a side effect, they died. And that's certainly the case in some situations. In other situations, though, it certainly is the case that whether it's someone who literally takes something to hurt themselves, they shoot themselves, or they do something to harm themselves, or they drink so much, or they abuse drugs and alcohol, so that it harms them and it harms them or it kills them. There's some people that are self-harming. They're hurting themselves, and they know they're hurting themselves. They're not accidentally like, oh, I woke up, I was having a great day, and I tripped and fell. Oh my goodness, I fell into a pile of all these drugs, and accidentally I swallowed, and now they accidentally went in my system. It's not like that. It's typical that they didn't accidentally. They knew they were taking drugs or alcohol. They were aware of it. And for some people, it's just another way to hurt themselves. So the title of this show is In a Fight Against Yourself. And my argument at this juncture is that people fight against themselves in different ways, right? So some people fight against themselves literally. They physically fight against themselves. They hurt themselves. Some people physically will punch themselves. Some people have a whole situation where they'll cut themselves. They're physically fighting themselves, and this is certainly a reality. And some people fight against themselves on purpose. They ingest alcohol or drugs, and it could be illegal or totally legal. It doesn't matter at all in my mind. amounts of substances to hurt themselves. So whether it's somebody literally, has a knife and is cutting themselves, or someone is intentionally on purpose taking a whole bunch of substances to hurt themselves, it's all fighting yourself. It's all the same sort of meta-narrative of here I am, and I'm fighting against myself. And the challenge, I think one of the reasons that this episode was important was I think that sometimes in our own heads, in our own lives, we'll fight against ourselves, right? And we'll think, oh, okay, well, I should fight against myself. I'm, quote, nothing. So somebody will get up and they'll be out in the world and they're thinking to themselves, oh, you're such an idiot. I can't believe, you forgot to, pick up that stuff at the store. And now you're going to have to go all the way back to the other side of town later because you're so dumb you can't remember what you're doing. And, oh, my goodness, you're a horrible driver. What did you just do? You're not even paying attention. Look at this. And I can't believe you. I can't believe you messed up with that thing at work. I mean, how did you do that? How are you so stupid? And a lot of us will do this. And I'm making the argument that these are all fights against ourselves. The types of weapons we use are different, whether it's literally a physical weapon, whether it's our own hand, whether it's ingesting substances in copious amounts that they'll harm us, whether it's using verbal abuse and insults and degrading ourselves and calling ourselves names. But a lot of us will think, well, yeah, I fight against myself, but gee, I should, right? Look at me. Look at my little existence. This isn't anything great, right? I'm not, quote, successful, which is a whole other debate on what that means. We've done some shows on that. But people will think, look, I'm not, rich. I'm not powerful. I'm not talented. I'm just here, just a cog in the wheel of the world. And sure, yeah, I fight against myself. I might call myself names. And again, some of this the way I'm characterizing it may sound a little odd, but just think about it. If somebody else took a knife and started hurting you, you'd say they were fighting against you. If somebody else took their hands and started hitting you, you'd say they're fighting me. If somebody else started screaming at you and calling you an idiot and saying, oh, you screw stuff up all the time, you're so dumb and you just fail. If somebody else was screaming at you, you'd say they were fighting. They were yelling at you, right? It's the same thing when you do it to yourself, right? You're getting similar outcomes. Right? So whether somebody else is the one hitting you or you're hitting you or someone else cut you or you cut you, you're still bleeding, right? Somebody else called you an idiot and said that you don't amount to anything, or you called yourself that. You still feel horrible. You're getting the same outcome because you're fighting against yourself. Fights in and of themselves are, aggressive actions. A fight's not a discussion. A fight's not a collaboration or negotiation. A fight is exactly that. There's an aggressor. Maybe there are two aggressors. Maybe there's only one aggressor. But it's an act of violence, right? And it could be, again, physical. It could be verbal. It could be just psychological or mental. But it's an act of violence and aggression. So the purpose of this show is to examine, hey, look, what if it's just a fight me against myself, right? Is there any problem to that? Could something negative happen as an outcome, or is that just sort of, hey, that's what people do, no biggie, is it a myth? So the question is, the myth that we're potentially going to see if it's a myth is, in a fight against yourself, you will always lose. Now, everyone who listens to my programs and is part of our community knows I tend not to like absolutes, right? Absolutes, always, never, things of that nature. Just because very rarely are they proven to be accurate. So to say in a fight against yourself, you will always lose, is that a myth? Right? Is that a lie? Let's see. So you are yourself, and this is in a very deep philosophical existential issue, right? Like, what does that mean? But no matter whether you're looking at it from a biological perspective or a physiological perspective or a spiritual or religious perspective, there's some entity, because most of us, I would argue almost all of us, who are conscious, we're in this sort of dialogue. And I've done another show, a couple of them, and I keep mentioning the statistic because it fascinates me, because I was curious for a really long time. You know, because I think things, like I hear thoughts, right? And I was always curious. I wonder how much I think. And I have this statistic that I've been using, that humans think about 70,000 thoughts a day. And it's from the UCLA or USC Neurological Institute. And the thing is, so let's say we hear those things, right, those thoughts or ideas. And then we also have actions, right? So I think something, I'm hungry, and then I do stuff with my body. I go and I literally find something to eat, and I put my hand on it, and I put it in my mouth. So it's not like it's just the thought, that the thought correlates to action. And so when you're asking whether or not in a fight against yourself you're going to lose, and whether or not that's an accurate statement or it's a myth, let's examine. Okay, so fight is some sort of act of aggression or violence. Okay, we got that. And the argument here is that you're going to lose. You're going to always lose. And then I even added the statement at the end of the episode title, so stop, right? We're trying to see, it's not a myth. The challenge that I'm going to propose when we fight against ourselves is the duality of it, right? That we're simultaneously both the perpetrator and the victim. Makes it a very difficult situation for us to, quote, win. On a very simplistic level, very oversimplified. I know. I don't make these caveats because I feel like these are areas that literally, you know, the entire history of the nature of the study of, you know, philosophy and man and, you know, who are we and, you know, and I'm trying to gloss over in like a 3-minute version. But these are introductory. I mean, that's the whole purpose of what we're doing, is exploring these things as an introduction. And then individually on our own, everyone in our community and everyone in our programs and our lives goes and kind of embarks on our own lifelong journey to find out what the, quote, answers are for ourselves. But in general, if I'm going to fight against myself and I want to, quote, win, and I'm the, you know, let's say I'm in the aggressor, and I do win, right? I wanted to inflict pain. So I'm the aggressor and I cut and I'm bleeding, so there's pain. Okay, I, quote, won. But the sort of big oversimplified problem is that every time I, quote, win the fight, because I am the aggressor, I'm also, unfortunately, at the same time, the victim. So every time I win, I also lose. Right? So I'm going to fight with myself, and I'm telling, you know, this entity, you know, you're an idiot. You're the stupidest person probably on the planet. How you wake up every day, I don't know, because all you do is fail. And other people just feel sorry for you because of how stupid you are. All right. If I win the fight, right, I inflict pain, and I make the entity that I'm fighting with suffer the pain of accepting you're a failure and you're an idiot and you shouldn't even exist. I will win, right? By causing the pain. The challenge is that I'm also, at the same time, the one suffering pain. So when you get to the extreme examples of this, and you look at people who, you know, murder themselves, we call that the suicide, right? And we don't usually use those terms, but that's what you're doing, right? It's the ultimate fight, I guess, against yourself at some level, at least physically. And that's what you're doing, right? You're murdering someone. It's just you. And on the lesser scale of this, when we're just verbally assaulting someone or degrading them or humiliating them or berating them, making them feel less than, the challenge is that the perpetrator doing the bad thing is also us. So I'm going to argue, and this is rare for our Myth Warrior series, but I'm going to argue that a lot of this is not a myth. Because we're fighting with ourselves, right? The topic isn't you're discussing with yourself, or you're engaged in self-growth, or you're exploring your boundaries. The title is you're fighting. Fighting in a violent way, whether it's physically or emotionally or psychologically. And the argument that you're always going to lose seems built into the question at a very simple level. I know that there are more complex constructions of the self and different sort of dimensions and things of that nature where there probably would be a way to make a very valid argument that you could fight against yourself and still be the victor. But in the purposes of this time frame and the purposes of this platform, in a very simple sort of everyday perspective, I'm going to argue that this is not a myth. That this is not a myth. That if there's going to be a fight, if there's going to be violence, and you are going to be the perpetrator, at the same time you're simultaneously the victim. And if you quote win, or even if you lose but you play well, meaning, right? Like, so, I was a fortunate child that my family did what many families do today and did when I was young, is they enroll their children in youth activities. And so I was in soccer, youth sports. I did not ever demonstrate any athletic ability, so it's a reality. But after, let's say I was on a team and we had a match and then we lost, then people would sort of, you go at the end and the kids kind of walk by each other and sort of put their hands, like high five each other. And then they'll say, good game, good game. And I think it's code for like, okay, you showed up, you didn't win. In my personal instance, I almost never, ever had any interaction with the ball or really anything else due to my very poor skills. But, good game, sort of like, hey, you gave it, some effort. You didn't forfeit the match, right? Like, you showed up. Good game. And I guess you could say the same. Like, maybe you're fighting with yourself. It's not even your best effort, right? Maybe it's just like, kind of a lazy, like, yeah, you're a horrible person. Why are you so ugly? So maybe that's not the best fight. Maybe it wasn't like the loudest or most aggressive or sustained, but it's still, you showed up. You didn't forfeit. I'm still going to argue that you've inflicted some sort of consequence because you went to the victim, which is also you, and at some level you inflicted some pain. It might not have been as much pain as you could have done. Maybe you were in the car and you were pulling up to, go into something for work, and you only had like 30 seconds left, so you didn't have the time to do like a long fight, with yourself, but you maybe did like a short one, like, well, now you're going to go screw this up. Yeah, just go on in there, just screw it up. Everybody's going to see what screw up you are, dummy. So maybe it wasn't like your best, most sustained fight, but, you got in a few, quick blows, quick jabs, verbally. You're still losing because you're still the one that has to suffer the pain. So the end part of this Myth Warriors title is so it says, in a fight against yourself, you will always lose. So stop. So the end of it is asking, okay, if you're asking, is the whole thing credible, right? So in a fight against yourself, you will always lose. I've argued that is somewhat credible based on my assertion that if you are at all able to perform any of your tasks in your violence, whether it's verbal or physical or emotional, then you have inflicted some pain. Maybe not a massive amount, but some. And my argument is that since you're the one that's also the victim who's received the pain, you've already lost. And so the end part is that you should stop. That you should stop what? Stop losing, right? Maybe fight better. I'm sure there's a fascinating issue to explore, people who might have legitimately diagnosed multiple versions of themselves, right? So that maybe then they could have more of a fair fight where one entity or personality or facet of them fights another facet, and there might be one where there's more of an equal matchup, I guess. Like I said, I'm sure there's a lot of fascinating ways to look at this, and I'm knowing how my mind works, I'm sure I'll probably go and start reading and trying to figure out some of that. But I do think for the purpose of the big picture of a sort of saying, is this a myth? Is this a bunch of garbage? Or is this something I might want to put some stock into looking to see if it's as credible as I think it might be? My argument is that it's credible. That when you fight against yourself, that you're going to lose because you are the victim. So anytime you even land a light punch, right, just a little bit saying to yourself as an aside, somebody walks by you and says something like, oh, nice sweater. And then in your head you think, oh, yeah, with the stain on it, with the stain that I couldn't clean because I'm an idiot, right? We do this. People do this. Little tiny insults and little tiny jabs of violence. The argument is you're always losing because, you know, you're the victim. And the end part is that you should stop doing it. Now, that is a whole different question. I'm sure there's an argument to be made. Hey, look, I like fighting against myself. I'm good at it. I've done it a long time. I've got different techniques. You know, and some people are so consistent, sort of like just a never-ending campaign, right? Almost like they're in, you know, 100 years war with themselves, or they're in the Crusades, and they're just, it never ends, right? So they start one campaign, and they, you know, people beat themselves up. I'll hear people sometimes verbalize things like this, like someone they'll say, oh, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to lose weight and get toned, and then they go do it, which is, you know, okay, great. And so then they go and they get in shape, and then instead of saying anything like, oh, this is good, they just change to a different battle. So what went from I'm going to get in shape to, oh, do you see what happened right here? Look at my muscle. I can't believe this. I've been, you know, in the gym, and I still can't get the definition I want, and I just, oh. So they never stop, right? Because even if they quote succeed in something that's positive, they just turn right around and change the rules to make it to find something else to fight against themselves. And they just keep going. And it seems like some people are so invested in this, like this sort of is their way of life. This is what they do. They get up every day, and they fight against themselves, and they keep losing, and there are consequences to it. And so at the beginning of the episode, I was saying that we'll see somebody in the media, and, you know, we could sit here all day and name famous people from around the world, and you think, well, how could somebody that famous, who was beautiful and rich and powerful, and everybody said was so great and won all the awards, and they still either murdered themselves. Like I said, people do succeed at that, or they try to murder themselves, or they take other instruments like drugs or alcohol, and they do use that to harm themselves. Why are they turning on themselves? Why? Especially when they have, quote, they have it all. And I would think that the point is simply that, as we shared, that if there's somebody that could set the goal that they're going to, you know, lose weight or get in shape or tone up or gain weight, or depending on, you know, whatever it was that they wanted to do physically, and then they do it, and then they just find another way to beat up on themselves. And I would argue that in a big picture way, it's similar with other people. On the outside, we all look at other people and think, oh. And usually we're thinking there's something about them that we sort of envy, right? Oh, wow. You know, I know for me, I'm on the short side of life, and I'll be around tall people, and I'll think, gosh, they're so lucky to be tall. I mean, not like I, you know, go get upset about it and start berating myself, but yeah, I mean, I wish sometimes I was taller. I think it would be kind of cool. And I think other people look at other people, and we always sort of see them in, I think, a more positive light than they see themselves, because we're not inside that internal fight. We don't know kind of the rules of battle that they called against themselves. And so we'll see people destroy themselves with, quote, everything, right? Money, fame, attention. It won't save you from yourself. Nothing will save you from yourself. So yes, I'm gonna conclude and argue that it is a losing battle always, and that you should stop. Because if you ultimately, quote, win and you destroy yourself, whether totally you destroy your actual existence or you ravage yourself to a point that you're unable to function or have a quality of life, what do you get? And nothing external will fix it, because we've all seen that, right? So I would argue stop, and stop now. And start on a different path, where we're not going to make an enemy of ourselves, but maybe we're going to try to make an ally. So thank you for joining me. You can always come to CourtneyAnderson.com, and I look forward to you continuing to be part of our show.